There's a hot chance that if you're listening to this podcast, you've tried therapy before. And maybe it didn't work out for you in the way that you wanted it to. Maybe your therapist told you that you were too self-aware. Maybe you learned a lot about why you think and feel the way you do, but you didn't learn a lot about what to do about it. I'm very pro-therapy, but personally when I went to therapy for myself after I noticed some funky thinking patterns, I started to feel worse, noticeably so, and every single session I would feel worse. And I thought, maybe this is a purge, like retinol. You chuck on retinol, it makes you break out, all the bad things happen, but then everything clears. But that's not what happened. After about 6 months, I tried 2 different therapists. I talked about my problems endlessly. And again, it just made me feel a lot worse. One of my therapists, she had a lot of red flags. I wouldn't recommend her as a therapist, but the other therapist was a good therapist. She had some good reviews. She seemed to really know her stuff, but I continued to feel worse as I went to her more. I 100% believe that if you are matched up with the right therapist at the right time in your life, it can be life-changing. But for me, after 6 months, literally hundreds of dollars and no progress, if anything, I'd gone backwards. I just didn't really have it in me to keep on looking, and I didn't want to pay for it, if I'm being honest with you. So I started reading books because I was that's what I know. I wasn't just reading self-helpy books because a lot of those aren't really written by people who are in the field of psychology. I was reading textbooks and any books written by actual psychologists, researchers, just anyone who obviously had a wealth of knowledge in that arena. And then I started finding work on metacognitive therapy. And that's when things started actually shifting for me. And that's when I felt okay, maybe it's possible to shift the way I feel. Maybe it's possible for these funky thought patterns not to be so prominent in my life. In this video, I want to talk about what metacognitive therapy is, some of the ideas within it, and how you can use them to change your life. Welcome to Grow With Intention, the podcast for people who want to create a life that feels good. This podcast episode is all about metacognitive therapy. Let's start with idea number 1 from metacognitive therapy, which is your thoughts do not matter, but your response to them does. So this is very much the premise of metacognitive therapy. Your thoughts are pretty meaningless. They are algorithmically generated. I like to see them as the videos that come up on your For You page. You cannot choose those videos. You can choose how you respond to them. And how you respond to them determines how often they will appear and how much power they have over you. What I have found from testing and trialing the ideas of metacognitive therapy is that the more you react to your difficult thoughts and feelings, the more prominent they become. So a lot of people, particularly people who go to therapy and get told you're too self-aware, or you are an intellectualizer, you're an analyzer. You just got a lot of thoughts in that head. You probably have puzzled over your feelings, your difficult feelings. And usually you puzzle in the moment. So maybe you feel demotivated and then you go, why am I feeling demotivated? What could the reason behind that be? Why do I feel this way now, but I didn't feel this way yesterday? If the feelings are bad enough, you might delve into what's wrong with me? Does this mean something about me that I feel this way? Am I struggling more than other people? What's the best way to process, address this thought, feeling? So the idea behind metacognitive therapy is that people get stuck in emotional suffering because they develop these patterns of responding to their inner experiences in ways that maintain those inner experiences, in ways that actually make those inner experiences come up more frequently. And the reason why I found therapy difficult is because it's about the content of your thoughts. So it's okay, well, what are you thinking? Let's challenge that thought. Let's find some evidence to rebut that thought. Let's analyze that thought. And I'm not really anti that because it obviously helps so many people. And I find it helpful sometimes. But all it really does for me is it helps me to react to my thoughts less, which is the premise of metacognitive therapy. So I find that it has a different purpose for me, which leads me to idea number 2, which is do all that you can to do nothing. Apologies for my voice as well for anyone listening. I am just at the end of a sickness. I'm feeling better, but I don't sound that much better. So like I said, a lot of therapy encourages analyzing your thoughts, intellectualizing, thinking more about the way you think. Whereas metacognitive therapy encourages you to do less. So Adrian Wells, who I think is the founder of metacognitive therapy, I should know that, but he really leans on this idea of do everything that you can to do nothing with your thoughts and feelings. When you have a negative emotional thought, do nothing. This does not mean you are suppressing your thoughts or trying to make them go away. You are not replacing your bad thoughts with good thoughts. Do not do that. You are doing everything that you can to practice non-reaction to your thoughts. You want to think of your difficult thoughts and feelings like a kid that is acting up. Ideally, unless the kid is like hurting someone or doing something really bad, you don't want to shame them for their behavior. And you don't want to shower them with attention, obviously, because the more you shower a kid with attention when they act up, the more they tend to act up. You want to practice not reacting in a super strong way at all, because a strong reaction will feed the kid's behavior. So when I first heard about these ideas, the first thing I applied it to was feelings of demotivation. I've always described myself as someone who is either go, 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 or stop. Just stop completely. But when I would get to these stop periods, I often would be like, whoa, what happened? Yesterday I was so motivated. Why do I not feel that way today? What's going on here? What does this mean about me? Very self-focused thinking. I would overreact to this change in emotion and I would just make a fuss. Whereas now, if I am feeling demotivated, my initial reaction is to do everything I can to do nothing, to not overanalyze my state or how I feel. I cannot tell you how much of a difference this has made to those stop periods. The stop periods still come, that is in my nature, but they are so much shorter and they're so much less of a big deal to me. I think they're just natural pauses that are kind of meant to be. Obviously, I'm talking I never have hard days. Not the case. I have hard days. And sometimes I try everything I can to do nothing, but things happen. However, when I use these ideas, which is, I like to say a lot of the time, it helps me so much. Moving on to the next idea, attention training. I actually talked about this in my video on inner work tools that have changed my life. I will have that link down below. So I know at first when I heard these ideas, I was like, leave me alone. I couldn't stop thinking if I tried. I could not prevent myself from reacting if I was paid to do so. And that's where attention training comes in. So a lot of people have this belief of, I have no control over what I pay attention to. I cannot control or influence my thoughts and feelings in any way, shape, or form. And that is one of the most unhelpful beliefs that you can have in your life when it comes to your mental health and feeling good, which is where attention training comes in. So metacognitive therapy has this track. It's one track. You can find it on the internet somewhere. There are also tracks on YouTube. You also don't even need a track. I'll talk about that later. But basically, it is a track where a bunch of different sounds play. So a train is going, there are some birds chirping, maybe there's I think there are waves in the background too, a bunch of stuff. And then there's a person that tells you, okay, move your attention to the waves. All of those sounds are playing at the same level, but the idea is that you notice yourself moving your attention between all of these sounds, and you are able to notice that it's possible for you to move your attention, which is kind of the whole goal of attention training. So it's not quite like meditation where it's okay, train your brain and develop your prefrontal cortex. Although it will do that, it's really about getting rid of that limiting belief of I cannot control my attention. So you can literally just sit outside, listen to the birds, the road, the neighbors next door, chuck on a podcast, chuck on some music, and then move your attention between all of those things. And just pay attention to how you can move your attention. The more evidence that you can give your brain that it is totally possible for you to move your attention around, that you are in control of your attention, that you can choose how much attention you give your difficult thoughts and feelings, the more mentally strong you will be. Oh, mentally strong, I don't know if that's a good word, but you know what I mean. If you actually went to a metacognitive therapist, they would generally say you want to do attention training twice a day, every day for 30 days. So it is, quite a bit. The next idea is that moods can really shift in an instant. Moods and feelings, they are transient. They are forever changing. I don't know why this seems like such a simple and obvious idea, but for me, it has helped me so much. So for example, a while ago, I was in a really sour mood. I was not in the mood to be doing anything. And then I heard a knock on the door. I went to the door, opened it up. It was my sister's friend. She'd gone to the wrong spot. And I was like, oh my God, no worries. We chit-chatted. I directed her in the right way. And then I was like, you know what I want to do? Tidy my house. I feel really motivated right now. All that had happened was that I had gotten my attention off of my sour mood for 2 minutes and I'd gotten a pleasant social interaction. My mood had shifted immediately. I went, tidied my house, I did a bunch of stuff. And I remember that was just one moment where I was like, damn, moods really do shift quick. Moods can change quickly. And I really try to pay attention when that kind of thing happens, because I think it's really important evidence to note that your mood can change quickly from happy to sad, but also sad to happy. I don't think everyone is like this. I think some people have like a lot more day-to-day stability. It's not that I'm like wildly unstable by any means. I think I'm just like a regular person that's a little sensitive and has lots of emotions, like probably a lot of you. And this is something that you can see even when you look at like kids. Kids cycle through emotions so quickly. Like I can watch my niece go from happy to sad like that, and from sad to happy like that. And while yes, you develop some emotional stability as you get older, I believe that those changes in emotions can happen even as an adult like that. In my interview with Ellen Langer, she talks about this in terms of pain. So pain management, it's really important to her that people pay attention to when their pain is not there. Pay attention to the variance in their pain and notice how it's just not always present. And I think that that's something that you need to do with your mental health too. Pay attention to when you are feeling good. Pay attention to when your mood shifts really quickly and you go from sad to happy. Pay attention to the variability in your symptoms of mental health difficulties, if that's what you're going through, but also just your ability to like shift. I remember on the Tim Ferriss podcast, actually, he interviewed this guy. No idea who it was, so I can't direct you there, but I just remember listening to it and this guy was saying, I never have a bad feeling for longer than 4 hours. I think that's what he said, 4 hours. And I remember listening to it and being like, I feel like that's the way it should be. And metacognitive therapy has like allowed it to be that way for me, for the most part. Like that's sort of my benchmark. If I have like a pretty bad feeling or I'm low and demotivated, I'm like, well, I know it's going to disappear. It may take an hour. It may take 3, but I just wanted to add, obviously all difficult feelings should not last for 3 hours. I meant as in like that's the longest that they could last. For me, periods of demotivation might last this long, but like feelings of sadness and feelings of anxiety, like they can pass very quickly. As long as I don't over focus on it, fixate on it, puzzle over it, or give it all of my attention, because I know that that will just feed it. The next idea is that rumination and worry is a habit. And I talked about this in my How to Stop Thinking About Yourself video as well. All habits are formed by perceived rewards. So that's literally the habit loop. Trigger, behavior, reward. You smoke because it calms you down. That's the reward. You eat chocolate because it gives you dopamine. That's the reward. And you ruminate or worry about your negative thoughts and feelings because it gives you the reward of feeling in control. And in some ways, it feels like helpful. It feels good. Even if logically, on a logical level, you can see rumination, worry, not good. That's just like you being able to see like eating too much chocolate, not good. When it comes to behavior change, knowing things on a logical level just like isn't helpful. You need to actually feel things. So the best way to sort of break this habit loop is firstly, do everything that you can to do nothing when you have difficult thoughts and feelings. If you can, just do not give that rumination the attention that it asks for. But secondly, if you find yourself ruminating, notice how bad it feels. Once you start noticing how bad rumination feels, it's kind of like rumination becomes like rancid food. Like that's how I feel if I find myself ruminating. And that's not to say that I don't find myself ruminating. I am not a perfect person. I still do to this day. But when I notice myself ruminating, it's as if I have discovered rancid food. And I'm just like, oh, like get it away from me. Like I hate this feeling. And it's not me going like, this is bad. I should not be ruminating. It's me going like, oh. And that in itself is helpful. You kind of need to like drop in your body and be like, ugh, and feel the ickiness of it all in order to train your brain and remove that reward portion from the habit loop. Once that reward feels less rewarding, that's when you can start to make progress towards breaking your rumination habit and being able to do all that you can to do nothing. Being able to actually practice metacognitive therapy. Now let's move to the recs of the week. So with every podcast episode, I give you 2 recommendations of the week that help you to dive deeper on the topic that I've talked about in this particular podcast episode. If you're like, damn, that's interesting, I want to know more, I'm going to recommend the book Metacognitive Therapy, which I've already recommended on like 2 podcasts. It is by Linda Berlin Sorensen. It's also free on Kindle Unlimited, which is why I'm putting it first. I feel like it gives you a really good base understanding of metacognitive therapy, and it's from someone who has practiced metacognitive therapy quite a bit in their own practice as a psychologist. And that's who we want to hear from. The other one is actually, it's a lot more like self-helpy, and I think some people would enjoy it less, some people would enjoy it more, depends on who you are. And that is Stop Thinking, Start Living by Richard Carlson. It makes no reference to metacognitive therapy but it is metacognitive therapy if you look at it through that lens. The danger of this book, I would say, is that it could be seen to be encouraging thought suppression, which is not part of metacognitive therapy in any way, shape, or form. It depends on how you interpret it. But if you look at it through a metacognitive therapy lens, I found it really helpful. And on to the next segment. Every week, I also do a little mini move because I'm like, you know what? It's so good to listen to these podcasts. But what is also really helpful is to like do something with what you've heard. Because otherwise you just, sat here, listened, learned, and then maybe ended up doing nothing, which is not what we want. So this week's little mini move that you can start doing immediately is to start noticing when your difficult thoughts and feelings arise. We all have them. And also notice when they pass. Pay close attention to when difficult thoughts arise and pass quickly. When something little happens that just shifts you out of difficult thoughts and feelings. I think building up that little well of evidence that these things are possible, that sometimes it's really easy to move out of difficult thoughts and feelings. Like it doesn't have to be arduous and horrible. Sometimes it happens just naturally with like a small interruption in your day. I appreciate you guys so very much. This is the kind of content I make all the time, so subscribe if you're into it, and I will see you soon.